listening to The Starting Zone, a podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. And now, here are your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft, the people who play it. Today is April 5th, 2023, and my name is Spencer Downey. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the podcast. I am joined today, as always, by my co-host, Jason Lucas. Jason, we are a month away, sir.
We are. I think we're a little taken aback by that.
We are. Everyone
the other day. I mean, you know, we got the news yesterday that 10.1 would be out May 2nd. Mm-hmm. And season 2, May 9th in North America. And, you know, I think we knew it would be soon, right? Because it's been on PTR for a while and they've been doing a lot of stuff to, you know, tweak what's going to be in the patch. And they've been doing a lot of testing. So we knew it was on the horizon. But, like, I don't know. I mean, I would have thought maybe like late May for the patch and maybe like early June for the season roll, you know, something like that. Last week of May, first week of June. But, yeah. It's quite a bit earlier, so which really condenses the time frame of potentially relevance for the primordial stones and all that. Like, this is your window to get whatever you need to get out of this season. And yeah, it has sort of maybe changed the goalpost for me a bit as well, or at least like altered my priorities in terms of what I think I care to accomplish in this window.
Yep. With
maybe like, you know, a month less than what I thought I had to mess around with stuff. I might scale back on some of the stuff that I thought I was going to do as 10.0.7 started kind of clicking in for me. But I mean, I'm excited. I think the game's headed in a cool direction, and I like a lot of stuff I'm hearing about PTR and about where we're going. So I'm excited to play it for sure. I did have that moment of, oh, am I actually ready for this? And so that's, you know, that's kind of where I'm at now.
Yeah, I thought we had 6 weeks. I thought we had 2 additional weeks before we started to see something happen, and so it's moved up a lot of my timelines as well. Obviously, I'd mentioned that I was hoping to get some raid time in before the season all ends as far as mythic level raid stuff, and I've certainly had some offers of late, particularly imminent of late, for doing just that. And so if I'm wanting to do this before the season ends, then I have to get my butt in gear when it comes to mythic raiding. Fortunately, a lot of nerf passes just happened, so it shouldn't be too difficult to actually down the bosses. I just need to actually be able to resolve my schedule and resolve the time that we have committed to all of this stuff to be able to actually like kill bosses and not be at work. Because work is, as everyone knows, since we're recording on a Wednesday, kind of one of those things that has been the bane of my schedule of late. And my work involves evenings as well, so it just means that trying to, you know, schedule regular raid times with people can be a pain in the butt. But we will see what all happens with that over the next couple of weeks, because we're, you know, kicking off right into season 2 real soon. But Jason, before we dive into what's going on this week and all the announcements, did you get up to stuff last week that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I sure did. So last week was, I think, the first time that our team had a chance to really utilize the annulets and the primordial stones with the people who care enough to set them up, like actually using them and having them maxed out and having like what's deemed to be, you know, the most powerful combinations and stuff. And reclears went really smooth. Even with, we sort of had this weird attendance problem. I mean, our attendance woes continue. And so I didn't really know what we were going to be able to do. And what we ended up doing, because of where we were at with numbers last Tuesday, was we just we full cleared heroic, and we did mythic Aeronach, and that was really nice for one night. And then we came back in on Wednesday with really low expectations. Figure, okay, we'll get council, we'll get a mythic choice out of the raid vault. We actually ended up re-clearing Taros. So the second Taros kill on Mythic with a group that I wasn't sure was going to be ready to go. But again, like the good players and the really dedicated players are getting a big boost from the annulets. And, you know, I think like our core raid team is pretty comfortable with the dance on Taros now. So that helped the people that were learning it kind of step in and figure it out and help us get the kill. So that was cool. This week I'm in a bit of a different spot because I have a bunch of people who are just like confirmed out this week. Their kids are on spring break or whatever. They're traveling. There's just stuff going on. So I don't think a Taros kill is going to be within reach. Last night we full cleared Heroic and then called it a night. Tonight, I think what we're going to do is say, if we have 20, we're just going to go look at Senarth all night. Even if we're not in a position to kill it, we need pulls. Like, there's no substitute for pulls. So even if we're pulling it with a group that ultimately isn't going to kill it, at least the people that are available get the practice and we see the dance and everything. Or maybe we end up doing nothing. Maybe we end up doing alt stuff since it's easy to power up alts now. And obviously, like, we have holiday weekend coming up. So, Sunday's already been kind of off the table, and I think it'll probably be off the table this week as well. So trying to be flexible. I mean, getting that Taros kill was the big goal, I think. That was the thing that seemed like it was within reach before the end of the season. And now that we know when the season ends, it's like, okay, we probably don't have the interest or the time to get the Senarth pulls in. So that was raid pretty much. Unfortunately didn't get a Jade Serpent key to show up among the people that I wanted to play with last week. So that didn't happen. I did some Court of Stars at plus 20, and I actually hit 2,700 rating, which is a pretty nice milestone. I decided last night after raid, like, I had none of my normal dungeon crew at all. All 4 other guys were not around last night. And yeah, and I really had a couple other guys who were willing to DPS, but it didn't have a healer and didn't even have 3 DPS. So I was like, I'm just going to try to pug some Jade Serpents. I'm just going to see what's out there, because if everybody else is demotivated or too busy to play, I still have this thing I need to check off my list. So I'm going to try it. First group I hopped into was a full guild group minus a tank. And
those are the best.
Yeah, you would think so. They were nice people, but they just didn't have the juice. One of the hunters posted like 53K overall, which is just not enough to clear a plus 20 in time. A lot of deaths, with full wipe on the first boss. And it was good though, because I need practice in the dungeon, and especially Fort Week is challenging in there. Every week is challenging in there, but it was an okay run. Nobody got testy, and I was like, all right, I'll hang in with these people. Like, if they're in here to complete it, then I'll complete it with them. And then I found another one to queue into, which was I think it was like 2 guildies, but it was more of an ad hoc group. These people had way higher Mythic Plus scores or higher scores on their mains, at least. And, everybody was in that 26 to 2,700 range, maybe even a little bit higher, at least on their main scores. And we ended up just blowing it up. I mean, I had a Ret Pally who was just bursting above like 300K on big pulls and stuff. And it was like night and day. The first run was 40 some minutes long, way over time and frustrating and slow. And then with this pug, the people that I ran with, it was like 25 minutes flat, got it in time, got the port done. Hey. All 8 of my ports are done for season 1. So I don't really care if the season ends now. I hope I can do it with my guys, but I don't have a lot of control over that, especially if people are in a position where they can't log on to play. Yeah. We have a key in the group this week, but I don't know if we have a group. So it was really fun. The people I was running with were great. We had a good time. Everybody was nice. Everybody was stoked to see the Keystone Hero thing pop up and everything. It was really fun. So shout out to those guys. That was great, and it felt so good to have that, not hanging over my head anymore as we kind of move out of season 1 and into this last month. Now I can just, I take whatever is available, take it as it comes, and just enjoy playing the game. And not be like, oh, I really have this goal I need to hit. So, that's awesome. And other than that, I've been playing around with alts. I got my monk up over like 390 item level. Monk has 4-piece. I maxed out my monk's amulet, so monk is like ready to go. Druid I haven't been as lucky on with like leather tokens. I don't get enough leather tokens. So Druid still has 3-piece, but that is my next project to get as far as the amulet goes. Once you do the amulet, you're pretty much done. It's not like you got to keep grinding Siscara vaults or something. Then one vault run should get, like, if you do 30 doors in a vault, you should be able to max out your ring. So that'll probably be this week's project. And then I level capped the Paladin. I just spammed like time walking from 62 up, just doing time walking, three time walkings in half an hour, and that's a level. Paladin hits level 70, immediately opens up his mailbox and has 4-piece with the catalyst and just like, I don't know, 370, 380 item level, made him the good blacksmithing shield, because you just go get your 5 sparks right away on an alt now. You don't have to do any of the tier quest line. So that was awesome. Like Paladin's like pretty much ready to go. I think I'll do his annulet after I get the Druids done this week, and got to get some time walking in this week to get those free heroic pieces for sure. The question now is, do I get the DK and the DH going? They're not my favorite tanks to play, and it's like, how many characters do I really realistically need to maintain at this part of the expansion?
Well, you want to, right? Is the big factor. It's not about need so much as the desire to maintain.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't think I have the bandwidth and the time to do this right now, but maybe. I'm on the fence right now. Right now I'm leaning towards no and just leaving those 2 tunes on the shelf until later in the expansion, but we'll see. If I end up finishing up with these 2 this week, or I get close to it, I still got a couple weeks here with time walking and everything. So I don't know. That's a maybe, but right now I just kind of feel relieved that I hit my big goals for the season, and it's just time to enjoy whatever's out there for now, and wait for season 2.
Yeah. I mean, it's really coming down to what people want to prioritize in the end here. And for some people, it means, oh, good, I don't need to worry about these things that I was going to worry about. I'm just going to wait, and then I'll hop in on all the new stuff with season 2. And that's, this is like my break time, right? You just instantly shift into vacation mode for the next 3 weeks before you start sort of the ramp up. Have I done everything? You get to clear out your bank of all the old items, because you're going to replace all the item level items that you have. You can liquidate some of your consumables if that's something you're looking to do. Like, that sort of stuff can sort of take place at this point. But it's really about what your list is and what that includes. This past week for me in WoW, I made sure I got in and did my time walking stuff. And one of the time walking dungeons we hit was Vortex Pinnacle, which is a dungeon I had run many, 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 many times to try and get my Reigns of the Drake of the North Wind, which just randomly dropped this past week on time walking for me.
Nice.
So that was hilarious. I couldn't believe it. We were just like, oh yeah, no, I haven't run this place in probably over a year to try and get this mount, since I was doing some mount runs every now and then. And we just were happening through it on a time walking, and there it was. So that was a wonderful surprise that I was very pleased about. And ended up getting that tune, a heroic main hand, out of the cash for the week. So that was also nice.
Nice.
For that tune to get a bit of an upgrade too. And so
that's a great thing about the Cataclysm time walking event, is like 2 of the dungeons have mount drops in addition to the global time walking mount. So if you get really lucky, you could get 3 mounts during a Cataclysm time walking. Yeah.
So that was a nice perk. And it took me, I think, it was like under an hour to do the 5. It wasn't that bad at all. We got the longer ones. We definitely got the longer ones to run through. So it was good, and the group I was with was smooth, and I was healing it, and nothing really bothered me at all. It was good. I enjoyed just nice, smooth, easy time walking runs. So good time. But so I just made sure I got that in. Really,
I think time walking is in a great spot. Just they feel like quick runs. The balance feels pretty good. Like they're not like pushing you to your limit. They're there for you to knock stuff over.
Yeah, there's still some mechanics you have to pay attention to, because they will one shot you if you stand the last boss of Vortex Pinnacle. Someone doesn't get inside of the triangle of safety. That's a lightning triangle that doesn't look like it's for safety, but it is. That prism. And if you don't get in there, you still get, one shot. That stuff still happens, but outside of that, it's they're pretty smooth runs. I was quite happy with it. So I'm looking forward to this week, and we'll see how that all plays out. But let's jump into what's going on this week in World of Warcraft, because there's plenty to talk about this show. All right, this week in WoW is the Mists of Pandaria time walking event, where Gate of the Setting Sun, Temple of the Jade Serpent, Stormstout Brewery, Shadowpan Monastery, Mogushan Palace, and Scholomance are all available for characters level 50 and up. They can do the time walking versions. Get yourself some loot off the end bosses in there, which are 359s, and the vendor sells 346s. You do 5 of them, you get yourself some heroic vault loot, which is 402 or above. And there's also the Sign of the Mist up. So if you happen to be doing anything as far as combat and quest goes in Mist of Pandaria lands, you'll get yourself 50% more reputation from those tasks. So certainly take advantage of your time walking. I'm sure some people will really enjoy going through Temple of the Jade Serpent time walking after doing it in Mythic Plus for this entire time.
Yeah, I was streaming last night while I was plugging these TJSs, and somebody popped in chat and they were like, "I just blew this place up in time walking. If that makes you feel any better," as we were like badly failing the first 20 I plugged into, which it kind of did make me feel better. Yeah.
There's also the Arena Skirmish bonus event going on because they're doubling up these time walking events, which is really nice. So if you're someone who wants to get yourself some honor gains from Arena Skirmishes are increased by 50%. And then, of course, there's the quest to win 10 of them, which gives you some conquest and honor as well. So if you want to get some, if you're waiting around for some friends to show up or waiting around for something to happen, you can pop into some skirmishes and get yourself some rewards that way. Pick up your quests in Vildraken, of course. As far as the rest of the week goes, just be sure you're aiding the Accord and you're doing your dungeon quests. You're picking those up. That's Halls of Infusion and Uldaman. Got to run those to get your extra reputation. PvP quests are arena skirmishes and rated arenas. So, hey, guess what? It's not just the arena skirmish bonus event. It's also the PvP quest for the week is arena skirmishes. So you can double up on these, which is quite nice. If you're someone who wants to take advantage of all that extra honor as far as that's involved. PvP Brawl for the week is Warsong Scramble. This is not my favorite brawl, if you could tell from that expression. It's Warsong Gulch. The flags are closer. There's like power-ups inside the arena that spawn faster. It's the first team to cap 10 flags. You don't have to have your flag in your base to be able to actually cap the flag on it. It's just a sprint and literally scramble. Like, it's called a scramble, and it's because they're not scrambling eggs, but because you're scrambling to complete it in time against the other team completing theirs in time. So it's not my favorite one, but it was an early one, so it's not too surprising, really.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only good thing about this is the games are fast because flags can be capped at any time. So even though you have to cap more flags, flags are just always getting capped. So, it's a bit more frenetic than a typical Warsong Gulch. So I guess that's a point in its favor, but it really doesn't bring anything unique to the Brawl pool, in my opinion.
No, it doesn't. World boss for the week is Bazrikron. The Shale Wing, the big Earth Proto Dragon in Waking Shores. And, of course, you can get yourself some loot off of this big old world boss if you're looking to get yourself some pieces of gear. We also have Mythic Plus, which is Fortified, Bolstering, and Storming, where non-boss enemies have more health and inflict 30% increased damage. When any non-boss enemy dies, its death cry empowers its nearby allies, increasing their health and damage. And while in combat, enemies periodically summon damaging whirlwinds that spin around and knock people up in the air and do a little bit of damage to them. So this is actually probably a kind of terrible week because you're going to have, as much as it's not tyrannical, which means you're going to kill bosses faster, which means, trash is going to be the burden and bosses are going to be the quick things. You're probably actually going to be using heroism, depending on which bosses you're fighting, on trash with very large pulls, if that's something you're looking at doing. But you have to keep in mind bolstering exists. So unless you're killing everything at the same time, you might want to be careful with those really large pulls because you can end up building a boss really, really quickly. Fortified and bolstering obviously are synchronous in the sense that when mobs have more base health and do more base damage and they're bolstered, that just amplifies it that much more, which makes building a boss that much easier. And storming means the longer you're on trash, the more you have to deal with the storming debuff. So fortified means you're on trash longer, and bolstering means you're on trash longer. It's going to be a slog week. It's a week where basically you want to be sure that you are cleaving down trash packs all very evenly, or maybe taking out that one absolute pain in the butt mob first, and then killing the rest of the pack evenly, because bolstering just is painful. It just is. Fortunately, it wears off. There is the fact that it now has a timer in which it will expire. So if you do build a boss, you can just sort of drag that mob around until finally its bolstering wears off and then finish it off, or have sacrificial lambs run in and get one shot by it. But I prefer dragging it around as opposed to sacrificing team members to it. But yeah, it's not a great week for your trying to get your fortified stuff done, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Earlier in the season, I feel like storming thundering was a much bigger problem, but everybody who has been participating this season. At this point, I feel like, we're much more comfortable with handling storming and the amount of time you have to react to it, and with the thundering overlaps or whatever. Like, okay, avoid the storming tornado and then clear thundering when it's safe, or pop the storming tornado and then clear the thundering, or clear the thundering and then worry about it or whatever. Like, thundering is disruptive for sure, and early in the season, storming thundering and quaking thundering felt like, what are we supposed to do with this? But it's settled down a bit. Bolstering can be really dangerous because that 20% extra damage on already fortified trash can be a lot. In general, like, you should be cleaving stuff down, and so bolstering effects should be relatively mild if you're killing stuff evenly, but that does mean that you're in combat with all of it for a long time. It's not like the absolute worst week. I mean, I think the good things here are that there's nothing that really drags anybody's attention away. Like, storming can be disruptive, but there's always stuff you have to move out of in combat anyway. You need to watch. You need to watch killing stuff when something else is super high health, or like doing chain pulls or something and dragging a mob in and bolstering a bunch of stuff. But if everybody's in that cleaving trash mode, then they're probably just cleaving trash, which is going to result in it dying. So that's pretty good, actually. But you got to be aware of it, and you get that bolstered mob that's like chain casting or whatever. Like, you better have an answer for that. That can certainly tax your healer or just result in like one-shot deaths, a couple stacks of bolstering, and a mob that just like spams spells at random targets. You could have one-off deaths. Storming also happens on boss fights, and that can be really challenging on maybe a fight like Wise Mari or whatever in Temple of the Jade Serpent, where you have like very limited windows where you have to move around a small space and avoid other stuff the boss is doing, and then there's a storming tornado in your way. This is the kind of thing where I try to eat all the stormings that I can and just keep them out of people's way, because it's minorly disruptive to me. I'm not doing that much damage compared to whatever anybody else is doing. So, I feel like I'm a good candidate to kind of be mildly disrupted. But, it can be storming thundering on a boss with already tight movement and positioning requirements can be tough even on a non-tyrannical boss, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, overall, I think it's not as bad as when we see like a Grievous Fort Week or something. This stuff is doable, but it's gonna test multiple different parts of your group comp in all phases, in trash and on bosses. So I think that's the thing that makes this week kind of maybe a bit intimidating, is you don't really have a break. There's no part of the dungeon that you're just kind of on autopilot, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's something where you just have to pay attention throughout the entire week. You just do. Like, when people are going through Mythic Plus, you just have to be on your toes the whole time as far as not bolstering stuff, and otherwise you can just easily take a run that could have been a time 20 and it just really degrades fast, and it's a problem. So got to pay attention to it. All right, April Trading Post is now up and live. If you're someone who hasn't stopped by and picked up your free tokens and like checked out what they have to offer, feel free to stop by and do that, because there's fresh stuff in the Trading Post. Darkmoon Faire is still currently live, so be sure you get your profession, skill, and knowledge all picked up, as well as that bonus reputation and experience, and the Traveler's Log progress as well, which is nice towards that Trading Post stuff. And of course, all the fun games that exist there as well, and some achievements, so be sure you're checking out Darkmoon Faire. And today, like right now, currently, is the March of the Tadpoles. It's happening right now. We have tadpoles marching themselves across the Borean Tundra. So if you want to go out and check that out, feel free to hop out and do that right away, because otherwise you're gonna miss it.
Yeah, we are not recording at an optimal time to plug this event, but it is really fun, and there's a fun quest chain if you've never done it before in Attune. If you have done it before, then you just have a repeatable quest to get your gift from your adopted Murloc, which is cool. And if you go out there and do it, you do get 150 points on your Traveler's Log for the month, just for going out there. And even if you have just the daily quest, like, that's all you have to do is just go do that, do the repeatable quest. And then, that's 150 points on your Traveler's Log for April for the Trading Post. So That was a pretty nice surprise. I was just going out there to see Spike anyway, because it's March of the Tadpoles. And then I was like, oh, look at that. So yeah, if you are within the sound of my voice before reset on Thursday, or I don't know if maybe it resets like early in the morning or something. Yeah, you should check it out because it's really fun. I went out there and I just hung out while I was doing other stuff. I just had WoW up on my game monitor and just kind of hung out there with the baby Murlocs for like an hour while I was kind of getting set up in the morning. And people were out there like PvPing, man. I felt like that was really not in the spirit of the March of the Tadpoles. No, don't PvP each other. We have to say goodbye to the Murloc babies.
Didn't they remove the bring your orphan into a battleground from the meta achievement because they felt that it was too weird?
They did.
Yeah, I thought so.
Even from Wrath Classic, they removed that.
Yeah.
Which I felt that was a bridge too far. But anyway, if you have any time before this resets, you should go do it because it's fun. It's cute and whatever. You'll be glad you did it.
Yep. As far as hot fixes go, there's only a few that we're going to highlight here, but in general, some classes receive some bug fixes and changes. The one I want to highlight is for Balance Druids because, hey, you know what? They're still near and dear to my heart. I still play one of them. So what they ended up doing is they made the Denizens of the Dream Fairy Dragons that spawn in for you on a proc if you've talented into it. They now spawn closer to you, and they'll go invisible or stealth when you go invisible or stealth, so that they're less likely to randomly pull other things around you, which, I always appreciate. It was wonderful when they changed that for a lot of other abilities, so I'm glad they're looking at that. They also boosted Starfall damage by 13%, and you might be going, hey, that sounds great. But they did it to fix something. I mean, overall, you will be doing more damage with Starfall, period. That is a thing. But this is the neat little stuff that is absolutely never able to be seen inside of a tooltip. And people only find by doing logging and actually really hard looking at something and giving a lot of feedback to devs. And devs look at it and then they confirm it. What happens with Starfall is when you cast it, there was an initial hit of damage that happens the moment you cast it. So the moment you actually cast the spell, anything within range of it that you're casting it gets tagged instantly with damage. However, how Starfall works this expansion is when you cast it a second time, so if you have enough astral power to cast it a second time, it wasn't actually doing that tick of damage. It was just refreshing your current one at its current rate of doing damage to sort of extend it and make it do slightly more damage as you gain more stacks. What that meant was you were losing ticks of Starfall for multiple casts. You were not getting that initial hit every time you cast it, which meant overall it was doing less damage than it should have been doing. So that's why they're increasing the damage on it. So overall, you will notice a damage increase. However, if you're casting Starfall, it might take a second for it to actually do damage because it's not doing that initial immediate tick. You're casting it, and then the first tick happens. So there'll be that pause after you cast it before damage lands. This is just one of those things I like to highlight because the finite little things about how spells work, as much as it doesn't matter to a lot of people, is really an interesting thing to sort of break down and look at when it comes to changes like this and understanding why a change like this takes place. So, cool one. I like seeing that one.
Yeah, and Starfall is so mysterious to many of us anyway, right? Like, it always seems like it's doing something that even the Druid doesn't fully control. So,
true.
Nice to see some fixes come in with that. Because it's a cool ability, and it's crucial for balanced Druids to be able to use it. And it's like, having it, behave in a way that everybody can understand and predict, I think is really important.
Yeah. As far as the raid goes, Razgeth got his big old mythic nerfs on. This is helping a lot of teams finish that boss off. So obviously 5% just straight off the health of the boss, as well as they reduced the push effect of the winds by 5%. So it's a little bit easier to run against. In Intermission 1, the Surging Ruiner, the Oathguard Vanguard, the Stormseeker Acolyte, the Flameward Herald, and the Frostforged Zealot, all of those adds got a 15% health nerf to make them much easier to deal with and die quickly. And the Colossal Stormfiend in Intermission 2, as well as the Electrified Colossal Stormfiend and the Seeking Stormling, also got 15% health nerfs off all of them. So just making this boss that much easier to take down for teams in this last month as we lead up to the rollover into Season 2, which means those teams that have been working on this boss for the last 4 weeks trying to actually kill it have now actually been able to start killing it, which is great. I'm glad to see that, because why not let people get their CEs before it goes away as something that you can earn when they've been working on it for that long, right? They've clearly put the time in. They just need to actually get the kill now. So give them the Achievo. Yeah. Get it done.
Yeah, Raz has been tuned pretty high for a pretty long time, I feel like. overall, I think Vault is a really well-tuned raid for the most part on most difficulties, but Raz has always been an outlier. And now we're in the last month, so Raz got taken down several pegs in terms of overall encounter difficulty here. It already saw a big round of nerfs once, and this is pretty big. I mean, overall, like Raz, okay, her health is coming down 5%. Like, it's not a huge deal, but still, that adds up. I mean, how many times have you been working on a prog boss and you get like stymied at a sub 5%, attempt and you wipe, right? Like that can certainly be the difference between a kill and not a kill. And reducing the push effect means that you're going to have fewer incidental deaths or whatever. And even just like
more uptime. It's just more
not
uptime.
as much. Lost uptime.
Yeah.
So that's really big. The intermission stuff, it's a huge health reduction on basically like every ad available. So that should speed that up, keep it a bit safer to get through. Shortening fights just in general helps with, people not having an opportunity to die to something careless, just for people to retain their focus. So that helps a lot too. I think we'll probably see a lot of new cutting edges in the wake of these nerfs. A couple weeks ago, I was thinking that maybe Heroic should also get a tuning pass. Like, we've seen a bunch of Mythic nerfs in Vault lately that haven't sort of filtered down to the lower difficulties. But after playing a couple weeks with people like actually getting some mileage out of their amulets and whatnot, I think Heroic tuning is in a fine place. And I don't expect it'll really get touched up again. Even I don't think it needs it. If it does, cool. I'm not going to complain. But I think like, especially for the level where your typical like Heroic raider lives, the amulet is such a big upgrade if they use it properly. The effect of the amulet kind of diminishes the closer you get to perfect play. And I'm nowhere near perfect play, so the amulet is really strong for me. It's just, I think if people are taking advantage of the power that the game is offering them, that Heroic really doesn't need a retune. But it probably makes sense to knock Raz down several pegs here. Just, let people get some kills before it's all said and done for the season.
Well, in a lot of cases, people want to get their mounts and stuff too, which is going to continue on. Like, you will still have the chance to get them, going forward, because it tends to be end of expansion when these things get rolled off to being really low drop percentages. But it's nice to, just make that process easier to start getting mounts out to people. So that's always nice too, or at least the unlocks for CE out to people. All right. As far as Heritage goes, the Heritage Quest goes, I really wanted to cover this because I didn't actually experience this, and I want to know what this is all about, and maybe Jason does, I'm not sure. During the new Clessington estate, Cecilia Clessington will no longer accuse players of smelling like rotten blubber when provoked. I don't remember this at all, so I'm curious what this is about.
I don't even know. I'm not exactly sure which chain this is from, and I don't have any recollection of any of this, but, if you've been accused by Cecilia Clessington of smelling like rotten blubber, then consider this your formal apology, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like this is BFA for...
it sounds like a Kultiran thing, right? But I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah. Anyways, that I saw that and I was like, of all the things to fix, that's it. Okay, cool.
They should have put another note in here that says like players no longer smell like rotten blubber. that would have been the way to follow up that patch note.
That maybe could have made it into the World of Warcraft patch 10.10 notes that were happening last week. You want to cover some of your favorites from this, Jason?
Yeah, so, it's been a long... Man, I don't know how many years I've been doing it, but we get fake patch notes on April Fool's Day. That's what World of Warcraft does for us. And so we got one this year, as we would expect. From Kaivax posted it, but I'm sure this was a collaborative effort among the CM and social media teams and whoever else had anything to offer. I'm just going to read kind of what the intro was. Obviously, we're not going to sit here and read all the joke patch notes, but the title of the document is called 10 Fast, 10 Spurious. And it says, Senior Chief Executive Lead Producer's Note. Please do not post this anywhere outside of our internal documentation, where we have the full notes for the next dozen patches all completely written in advance. Please, I'm begging you to keep your fingers off the copy paste keys. Please protect our perfect record of never leaking any content in advance. And then there's a note from the social media team that says, we'd like to thank the WoW development team for giving us the opportunity to take over all aspects of the creation and service of World of Warcraft. It's been a blast being in control of literally everything, and we'd like to think we've done as good a job at making all decisions as the esports team did before us.
Oh my goodness. The shade. Yeah.
So I just wanted to highlight my two favorite jokes in the post this year. Under the rogue notes, there was one that says the assassination specialization has been renamed combat, which just cracked me up, especially because one of my very good WoW friends is a rogue main, outlaw main, who really has missed combat since 2016. And it was just particularly funny. And then there was a warlock. The only warlock note was no changes necessary, possibly forever, which I think is just perfect for warlocks. So that tickled me. But yeah, they're fun. They're always a good time. And so, yeah, you should check them out if you haven't, because, there's something for everybody in there. They have like fake content. They have fake class changes, all that stuff. So yeah, it was funny. This year's was good. The ones that landed really landed for me.
Good. No, that's good. All right. We also had some AWC stuff happen this past weekend, but we're going to talk about the coming up grand finals.
No, AWC, we had MDI.
Oh, sorry. We had MDI this past weekend. AWC is what's coming up this weekend. That's right. Yep. They split them up. So, yes, we're alternating PvP and PvE as far as weekends go. Although it's all PvP because we're all competing against each other, apparently. So, anyways, AWC Dragonflight Season 1 Global Finals start April 7th. And so this is going to be broadcasting at 10 p.m. Pacific time, so that's 1 p.m. Eastern. And the grand finals are going to be happening on the 8th and 9th. The gauntlet is taking place on the 7th. So in other words, the early bracket is taking place on the 7th. It's going to be on Twitch. It's going to be on YouTube at your, /Warcrafts if you're looking for any of that. $300,000 prize pool for this. And this is the big deal for people. This is the big American and North and European gauntlets that take place. So yeah, looking forward to seeing how this all turns out PvP-wise, especially with some of the most recent hotfix changes. I'm always curious when they decide to do... Well, they did this ages ago. They used to consider keeping people on an older patch to make sure that they didn't have recent changes come through. But, with Boomkin changes to Starfall, does this change anything for teams? With changes to Paladins and Ret Paladins and what that's been doing the past 2 weeks, does that change anything for teams? Like, it's been... a lot of different class changes happening, and this tuning fix is happening. So we'll see what these teams end up coming out the gate with this coming weekend.
Yeah, 10.0.7 was like maybe the biggest slate of like class tuning changes we've ever seen mid-patch, mid-season. Also, I haven't been paying that much attention to AWC of late, to be honest. But I don't ever remember them doing this kind of gauntlet format. So what happens on Friday is the gauntlet matches happen, which is basically a play-in. There's 3 teams from each region qualified for the grand finals, and then there's a 4th spot that whoever survives the gauntlet will advance into that grand finals bracket. So the teams are like seeded, I guess, based on where they ranked. And so if you're one of the bottom seeds, you got a long way to go to try to win the play-in, because you got to win 4 sets of matches.
Yeah.
But if you're Team Liquid, you basically just need to win your play-in. So that's kind of a cool idea. Like, I don't remember them doing a format like this before, and it gives a lot of teams a chance to kind of have a showcase on a grand finals weekend, which is cool. But I just don't remember that particular formatting being part of AWC anytime recently. So that's kind of a different wrinkle they're throwing into it, which is cool. But yeah, I mean, I guess all of this was also a sign that season 2 is imminent, huh?
yeah. I mean,
like, okay, this is all the esports are done for season 1. Yeah, I guess that means it's time for season 2.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to give the teams a bit of a break, but yeah, it's certainly a good sign that we're 4 to 6 weeks away. All right, so, and speaking of which, basically Embers of Neltharion, the season 2 patch 10.1 will be kicking off May 2nd. And so if you're someone who is looking forward to checking out all of the new content, including like the Zaralek Caverns, there's going to be cross-faction guilds coming in with this. There's going to be the new assaults happening. You're going to have a bunch of new people you can meet as far as like the Niffin go. So like there's just that before we even dig into like the season 2 stuff. So cross faction guilds, Jason, something we've been looking forward to for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
We're glad to
And
see
they're
that
not
kicking in.
like they're not wavering on this right now. Like
Yeah.
when it first went into PTR, we had like a post from Bornak that was like,
Yeah.
well, we're going to test it.
Yeah.
And we're committed to this feature, but we don't know if it's going to make 10.1. And in the official stuff that came out this week, they're not like, well, we're going to try. So, I mean, it's cross-faction guilds are on the menu, it seems like. So
Yep.
we'll see what kind of havoc that wreaks when they go to push it live. But maybe it wasn't as thorny to implement at least in testing as maybe they originally assumed or something. It was just funny because that's, there's a lot of unprecedented stuff happening around World of Warcraft lately. And that was one thing, I think, like announcing this feature, but saying like, we don't know when we're going to ship it. And we're going to test it in this PTR, but we're not committed to shipping it in this patch. Like I don't ever remember them doing stuff like that either. So, I mean, cross-faction guild is a great quality of life upgrade. I think we need better guild tools and guild support overall, but letting people play whatever they want with who they want to play with that's huge for the game.
Yeah. So Dragonflight Season 2 kicks off May 9th. That means that we're going to see normal, heroic, and mythic all in the same week, just like we did this past season. So that'll all be kicking off at the same time. We also have the new PvP ladder and gear, as well as seasonal affixes and new dungeons to Mythic Plus in the rotation. So they did mention seasonal affixes. Does this mean we have a seasonal affix, like the actual replacement for Thunder?
Yeah,
it's
a little weird. Like the way they put it is weird, and it makes it sound.
I'm wondering if it's just affix combinations.
Ominous. Yeah, I think what they're meaning is, we're seeing old affixes drop out and new affixes come in, and we're having sort of this rotation of the pool of affixes overall. Saying the new season also brings seasonal affixes is probably not the way to go, considering for the last 2 expansions and 1 patch, you had a thing that was literally called the seasonal affix.
Yeah.
And then you told us you weren't going to have that. I mean, they haven't tested it. Like Mythic Plus testing exists and has been open and has been tested. And there wasn't one.
Yeah.
And they're shipping the patch in a month. So if they're going to work up a seasonal affix and hope that people can test it in time,
and that their balancing and tuning is good. Yeah. I don't think. I think it's going to be the plan of like a 3 affix situation versus the 4 that we've been living in. Yeah, if they're doing it, it'd better just be hey, here's a vendor at the start, buy this buff from, and then you can run through the whole dungeon with this buff on. I
right.
guess,
just have like like almost a non-affix like Shadowlands Season 4 was.
Exactly. But they talk about the rotation being Brackenhide Hollow, Halls of Infusion, Uldaman, Legacy of Tyr, Naltharius, as well as Freedom. Freehold is what I meant to say. I keep saying Freedom, but Freehold, as well as the Underwrought and Vortex Pinnacle and Naltharian's Lair. So, man, all right. Nel's Lair is going to be a trip. I'm going to dig going back through there again, man. I love that dungeon. Oh, so good.
I hope I still love it after Season 2.
Yeah.
It was one of my favorites. I mean, it was a keystone in its day. We had, Legion Keystone. So Nel's Lair, I think it's just one of the, just most evocative dungeons. It tells a cool story. It's got fun bad guys to fight. And it's perfect for this patch. It's kind of a no-brainer, I think, to throw it into the pool for Dragonflight Season 2. The Embers of Neltharion patch. What if we have Neltharian's Lair in the pool? I think Freehold is a big fan favorite. That was everybody's favorite key to do in BFA. The pirate theming is really fun. You had a lot of flexibility with how you approach the routing, and it was easy. Like the tuning was just favorable. It was a fun one to do. We'll see how the new dungeons go. Out the gate, the Dragonflight dungeons were kind of brutal at the start of Season 1, but I think they reined them in, and we definitely have easier and harder dungeons, and there are some old dungeons that are among the harder dungeons. It's not just all the Dragonflight dungeons in Season 1 are the hard ones. Underrot could be really cool. Underrot was a dungeon that was great in BFA Season 4 because you could do so much with the routing with the Awakened affix or whatever it was called, where you could make the wormholes. I don't know how it's going to feel in a more modern context and without the ability to do that, but that's a dungeon that presents some choices, right? It's laid out in a way that you have some different choices you can make, and you can kind of vary up your runs. And it's not like a huge dungeon, but it has some pretty punishing bosses. So Yeah, I'm kind of on the fence about that one. Underrot wasn't like one of my favorite dungeons to do in BFA. I think it's cool, but it definitely presents. There's some scary stuff in that dungeon with various affix combos.
Very scary stuff in that dungeon. But the coolest part about all of this is that Freehold, Underrot, and Vortex Pinnacle all have mounts that drop. So you're gonna be seeing them all season. There's gonna be a chance for people to get mounts out of all three of those, which is kind of cool to see. So.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, there's a lot of mount dungeons in this pool as well, and I mean, I assume that they're fair game because when they've had like dungeon mounts in Keystones in older content, you were able to get them out of the end of dungeon chest.
Yep.
So should be fair game here too.
Yeah, the new raid is going to be Aberrus, the Shadowed Crucible, and it's going to be taking place down the Zeralik Cavern. You know, big surprise, the new zone's going to have where the new raid is. Sorry, I got thunder crackling through my house at the moment. That's what that noise is.
Well, that's ominous because we're talking about Neltharion's secret laboratory, and then the thunder rumbles in.
Yeah. No, we have a very large storm in the area at the moment that's been going through for the past 5 hours, and so I've been dealing with that for quite a bit. But with that, I mean, you can jump into PTR right now and actually check out the latest testing stuff for all of this content, if that's something you're wanting to do. But we got the initial, release date, blog post that came out. We'll obviously get a lot more information the next couple of weeks. There'll probably be some interviews by different content creators coming out around this content, and we'll get a lot more info. So we will see what all happens as we head up towards this release.
Yeah, something weird here. Like, they are doing the simultaneous release schedule again, which I don't think is necessarily a great idea. I don't think people really like that at any level of play. Like at lower levels of play, it doesn't matter because you're not doing Mythic Week 1. But if you're trying to do Mythic Week 1, then how do you balance that around? Like, you need to gear up. You need to like get new set token. Like, how do you manage your time in that situation? And really weird that there's no Raid Finder schedule just published as part of this post. Like, that's been a staple of the last many expansions, many patch releases. It's like, here's the Raid Finder schedule, like plan accordingly. Just saying more details to follow on the Raid Finder schedule is strange. Like,
it's strange.
Are they trying to like maybe obfuscate like the names of the wings or something? Like, you would figure that Raid Finder probably releases May 16th, and then there's a new wing every other week until all the bosses are out. Because that's how they have done this traditionally over many years, but maybe they're doing something different this time. Like, maybe they're going to wait a little longer but open up more of it faster or something. I don't know, and we'll certainly report on it as we get the schedule.
Yeah, I'm part of me wonders whether they don't want to release how many wings it's going to be, like whether they're contemplating which bosses fall into which wings and how that's all laid out. So we'll have to see how all of that plays out going forward.
That's true.
Yeah,
it might just not be all blocked in yet, where it's like, because I think isn't Aberrus is like a 9-boss raid, right? So you could do 3, 3, and 3, but that's kind of a lot when you have presumably the last boss is going to be a big project. So do you do like 3, 3, 2, and 1 or whatever, or you block it out a bit differently? Maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe that's just not finalized, and this is just how fast they're moving these days. It's like, well, we'll parcel out the LFR instances later.
Yeah, and if you're hearing some background noise right now, it's a torrential downpour taking place outside of my house at the moment, which hopefully lets up shortly. But
hopefully they don't get washed away or zapped.
Yeah, exactly. Both. Yeah. So Dragonflight Embers of Neltharion PTR notes that are up there. There's obviously been more updates coming through. They went through and actually had some of the affixes kick in. So one of the new affixes we're getting is Incorporeal, where while in combat, incorporeal beings appear and attempt to destabilize players with spells that reduce their damage and healing done. Incorporeal beings are susceptible to all forms of crowd control. So in other words, you'll have more trash, and this trash makes you feel like a wet noodle. So you want to be sure you're knocking it out early before everyone becomes incorporeal and it's no fun. So be sure you're checking that one out. As far as the new affixes go when they kick in. We're also seeing Afflicted come in, where while in combat, afflicted souls appear that seek the aid of players. Afflicted souls spawn with poison, curse, and disease afflictions. Removing any of these affixes or restoring the spirit to full health causes it to despawn. Failure to remove the afflictions in time will inflict the negative status effects on players. So yeah, this is like a very healing-centric one, which I think is kind of cool, although you can still have things like, your off healers or your off classes have the ability to remove something. Like mages remove curse, that kind of idea. That can help deal with some of these. Mass Dispel is going to be a curious one about this because it's poison, curse, and disease. So Mass Dispel doesn't actually land on these. But Revival is going to be real fun. If you drop Revival and it counts towards removing these things, you could see a lot of monks sort of rolling with that and just being like, hey, you know what, we're going to do a really big pull. When these things spawn in the big pull, I'm going to hit Revival. It's going to clear all of them, and we're going to obviously pop the group back up. So that could be a neat thing if that works that way. We'll have to wait and see.
Like off healing and non healers who have purges or dispels or whatever could be awesome for this. There's because of the way they set it up, because it has poison, curse, disease, and a health bar, and if you dispel something off of it or heal it up, it goes away. Like you have a lot of ways to solve that problem, which is cool. That's I think one thing we talk about all the time with affixes is counterplay and interactivity, right? And so I feel like an affix like this provides you with a lot of different opportunities for that. There's a lot of different ways you can solve the afflicted problem.
Yeah. I'm actually strong against the next affix, which is entangling, where while in combat, entangling vines snare players. It is very frustrating as a healer to have everyone snared at the same time, or a bunch of people snared at the same time, and people get very complainy about it very quickly. Like it is one of the number one things that agitates players when you're doing a Mythic Plus run is someone being snared, because a melee immediately can't do damage because they can't get to targets or move around. Anyone who gets snared is standing in something they don't want to be standing in, is now very upset about that happening. And inevitably, it all gets blamed on the healer for not dispelling them fast enough or clearing them fast enough. So I haven't seen this affix in the sense that I haven't gone on PTR and checked it, but I assume they are attackable, which means if you get snared, you can destroy your own ones. I'm assuming they can get hit by cleave effects, which means if you're casting Starfall or something, it's clearing the entanglings as they go. And I would hope that the health is low enough that you can do this fairly quickly, and it isn't more efficient to just dispel the player, because man, oh man, if your group's getting entangled and you wipe to it and the healer gets blamed, it is going to be toxic as all get out as an affix.
Yeah. Well, the roots are not, it's not like, it's not a targetable thing. It's a thing that like pops up underneath your player. I haven't played PTR either, but I've seen some videos of how this works. And basically like roots pop up and you get snared, slowed, not rooted to the ground.
Okay. That's good.
And snare breakers work. Blessing of Freedom, Avatar, Power Shift, and there's a lot of snare breakers in the game. So any of that stuff will counteract it. And it works kind of like if you're if you're weeding your Pandaria garden.
Okay.
Right? You're like snared around a spot and you move far enough away and the snare breaks. So, it's, I feel like it's going to be one of those affixes like we've had with Quaking or maybe Volcanic to a lesser effect, where it's like, if you get this at a really bad time, it can result in really bad stuff happening. But in most of the course of a dungeon, you have answers for it. Again, you have options. You can use snare breakers, or you can move, or what have you. You can, depending on what classes you have in your dungeon. Like if you get a paladin or something, you can freedom somebody. You can break somebody else's snare with stuff like that. So there's options for counterplay. It's the one that certainly seems a bit more disruptive than the other two brand new ones. Yeah. Because it does impact your movement, but I don't know. I mean, I feel like we've always had, or for a long time, that we've had affixes like that in the pool, where you can't like move where you want to when you want to, and you have to just figure that out. So
right.
I don't know. I mean, you have like 8 seconds, I think, to break the snare. I don't know how long exactly it takes to, if you're like just moving at normal speed, like how long it takes to walk out of it, but it's your area denial type of mechanic for this pool.
Yeah. I don't know. I have to see it. We have to experience it to really know where the feedback comes from. That to me just puts a little red flag on, hey, this could become the players complain about this very quickly, and it becomes rampant that they really hate this affix very quickly. But we'll see. They also update Explosive, where basically they're making fewer explosive orbs spawn, but they have substantially higher health. I dislike this change as well. I really like the whack-a-mole method of killing off explosive orbs. I was not a fan of the older explosive orbs that you actually had to turn and essentially cast into full on to be able to kill. And if the health is going up enough that I have to essentially like do a rotation to kill an explosive orb, I'm not going to be super impressed at how that works, because already we struggle with people paying enough attention to explosive orbs that are spawning. To then add in, hey, the one person who's trying to kill it can't kill it in time by themselves is not going to feel fun. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's another post we got later after the PTR notes. I think it came in Monday, maybe it was yesterday. About some of the stuff with explosive is still in flux, I think, for where we're going to end up. But they don't want it to be a healer problem, and which is sort of what it's turned into, because having it just die to anything means like, okay, well, I'm going to stand here and build my combo points on the targets we're actually trying to kill. You shoot your moonfires at the explosive orbs, please.
Yeah.
I can understand why they want to move away from that, and I find like explosive to be just particularly irritating. Your attention is constantly drawn away to these things. I think they have a couple interesting proposed changes to explosive. Why don't we actually just jump to a little bit of that follow up,
sure,
so that we can kind of contextualize what I'm beating around the bush about.
Yeah.
We got a status update post from StoneKey on the forums, who is a developer, and I'm just going to read what StoneKey wrote, which says, "We've heard feedback both that explosives in their new form have too much health, and that in general it makes sense to try and ignore them, thus making them a healer problem in a different way than before. We're discussing a redesign for the explosive affix to shift responsibility away from healers. The proposed change would cause explosives to instead shield creatures for a percentage of the explosive's remaining health when its cast completes." I like this a lot better.
A lot more.
I know there are specs that don't like target switching, but it's like, okay, here's the explosive. Everybody target the explosive and nuke it down. And you know what? Even if you don't kill it, okay, the mobs get a small damage shield instead of it doing like a huge burst of AoE damage to the party.
Exactly.
So I feel like they're probably going to lean in this direction, maybe depending on how testing and tuning and stuff goes, because they wouldn't talk about it if it was like, well, this is like some pie in the sky thing. It wouldn't be in blue text if it wasn't maybe like a likely direction they end up in.
Yeah.
I feel like this is better than just straight up, okay, the DPS needs to hard switch to this thing, and if they don't kill it in time, somebody probably dies. Like that's not good. This is better. You have to rename it probably, right? Like it's not exploding anymore, but I kind of like that interaction a bit better. In that post, there's also some talk about, obviously Afflicted is incentivizing Dispel utility, but the health of the Afflicted mobs has been a bit too high. So, the healing hasn't felt like an option. Like you can't heal them to full on hierarchy. So expect that to be tuned around. Incorporeal, the emphasis is on crowd control, and the things they're looking to tune are spawn rate, so spawning too many at once, and crowd control breaking on them once it's applied, and also a change that would make them despawn from combat once you're out of combat, that the incorporeals would despawn. Because what happens right now is I think they're like alive for 20 seconds, something like that, and you got to keep them interrupted or locked down so they can't cast their thing. And that includes, like, if the way it was tested recently, if they're alive when your combat ends, you are now standing there beating on your incorporeal, trying to keep it interrupted. So until it despawns, or you hit a window where it's going to despawn before its next cast finishes.
Yeah.
And like that, I'm stuck in combat with an affix thing sucks. We don't like that. So those sound like good changes there. And, regarding entangling, like the big thing they mentioned is improving visual clarity, audio cues, just so that, okay, the vine is here and you know where it is and where you want to go to try to break it. The craziest change, I think, that they're talking about, I don't know, crazy is not a good way to put it. It is a big shift to the landscape of what we're used to with Mythic Plus, is potentially changing the ranks at which affixes come in.
Yeah.
Because we're in a world where we go up to level 20 for rewards now. And you and I have talked about this on the show many times. So basically, the thing that they're proposing is putting the first affix at level 7 and instead of level 4, and putting the second affix at level 14 instead of at level 7, which I think would be a huge win for most players. I think for your higher end, your Keystone Master players and above, like, it's not going to make any difference. It's not going to change what you do, especially in season 2 of an expansion. You're never going to do Keystones at level 7, at level 14, maybe, right? Like, you're going to come in doing 15 plus probably. But for your other characters and your lower level dungeon runners, especially with how granular the gear upgrade system is becoming, this gives people a chance to get way farther into the system than they otherwise would be. And, maybe that helps them sort of learn how to handle stuff that scales up this much from the per rank scaling and before layering too many affixes on. And again, like, the plan is to not have a seasonal affix, so you only have these 3 affixes to contend with. I think overall these are good changes. People are mad about new affixes. A lot of people just don't want affixes in Mythic Plus, or they don't want affixes that don't give you a buff.
Yeah.
And I am not saying that you can't be mad about that, but I feel like, at least in this era of the game, that it's a losing battle. The developers think that affixes are there to make a dungeon harder. And that is their purpose. That is why they exist.
Yeah.
And I do not see a world in this expansion, and maybe not the next expansion, and maybe not ever, where they just straight up remove affixes and all Mythic Plus is scaling health and damage on mobs and bosses, just, per rank. I also, like, they're actively moving away from the Kiss Curse mechanics. And I think that is a philosophical shift. I think that they don't want to have players get too much power against the dungeon tuning based on exploiting an affix.
Well, so here's the other thing there, right? And I want to highlight this real quick. The issue with Kiss Curse inside a lot of Mythic Plus is it becomes whichever players figure out the particular class, as you sort of hinted at there, class spec combo for taking advantage of that Kiss Curse to the extreme, and can play that incredibly high end well, will always have be able to do the highest keys, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It makes the learning curve way too steep, in my opinion, for this kind of content in the game. It becomes something that is almost obscured as to how you actually could do a keystone that high, and how people are doing it. It becomes like super secret around what special things they're doing and manipulating as far as the Kiss Curse goes to be able to take advantage of this. That's, in my opinion, not fun for the majority of players who do Mythic Plus. When the devs feel like they need to balance Mythic Plus around people particularly taking advantage of a Kiss Curse affix, that's weird to me. You shouldn't. It should be, in my opinion, a dungeon that is balanced entirely around very mediocre taking advantage of a Kiss Curse. And if you happen to be better at doing it, then great, you're better at doing it. But similarly to what happened in last expansion with Shadowlands, the devs going to get into an arms race where they're like, oh, well, if you're going to take advantage of that and be able to pull out these kind of numbers, then we better make this even harder. And so suddenly you end up in this arms race where the people who suffer are the ones who are just average players wanting to do the content. So I dislike when we run into situations like that, and I feel like a lot of Kiss Curses move the entire development team, or most of them, and a lot of the player base in that direction, in that adversary direction.
Yeah, I mean I agree with you pretty much. I don't like the Kiss Curse concept in Mythic Plus. I feel like it turns Mythic Plus into a mini game versus being the kind of skill testing, problem solving exercise that it was when they originally brought it in. And I don't know, maybe I'm getting old. Maybe this is a back in my day thing. I think if you're going to give me power that makes stuff like busted fun, let me just have it on my character. Give me corruption. I know corruption was a thing a lot of people hated because of the way it was implemented, but I think that ultimately corruption was a really cool system that maybe they could have eased up on some of the caps and some of the weekly maintenance and stuff, and it really would have been amazing. The Amulet's a good example. The Amulet's like corruption extremely light, right? It's like travel size corruption. These are things that are good for all forms of gameplay. Having a thing where, I get 70% haste over the course of doing a Mythic Plus dungeon, like, I don't know. To me, that's just bizarre. It's not that interesting. It doesn't power my character up in other forms of content, and I play other forms of content, and it changes the way I play my character inside this one particular mode. And now this is like the thing I need to do. I don't know. I feel like arms race is the way you put it, which I think is pretty on point. And I think overall, I think they've just made this season. I mean, we talked about it a lot before any of this stuff started happening on PTR. We had an episode where we did a huge discussion of my gripes about the state of Mythic Plus, which is a mode that I love and I have a lot of fun with. I think they just made it too complicated. There's just too many layers to it, and the seasonal affix is a big problem. And some of the affixes were feeling pretty moldy. So I don't know. On the one hand, I see some conversation in the wider community like freaking out about this, and just dooming about like how terrible these affixes are going to be. I'm not getting that vibe from what I'm reading and what the devs are saying, and from what I'm seeing from people who are actually doing testing. Granted, I'm not doing testing. Mm-hmm. I feel like there probably wasn't anything that they could introduce as a new affix mechanic that wouldn't have just been jeered, right? Unless it was a kiss curse thing. There are a lot of vocal people who really just don't want affixes in Mythic Plus at all. They just want flat scaling, and if we have to have affixes, then they better be buffing me. I don't know, man. That seems like a huge philosophical shift against the purpose of the mode, and I don't think it's where the devs are at. So I think you might be barking up the wrong tree with that one with the devs right now, but I don't know. I mean, I think you could have a world where you don't have affixes and stuff just scales, per rank and gets harder, and you see how far you can take it. I'm not sure how interesting that would be on a week-to-week basis outside of like, well, I do this to get my vault, and I feel like the game should present an interesting or fun challenge aside from just the purpose of acquiring gear. But I guess my concern here is that, as far as I'm aware, as of right now, as we're recording this, I don't think Mythic Plus is just like open for testing. They're doing like testing weekends, and we're a month away from season 2.
Yeah.
So yeah. They are changing a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of tuning that needs to be done. And we got 8 dungeons that we are not doing right now that are rotating into the pool. So I'm sort of bracing myself for a rocky start to the season with all these changes to affixes, changes to the dungeon pool, and kind of philosophical changes to what the mode means and how the gearing works alongside of it. It might be a little bumpy out of the gate.
It might. And I guess for me, the only 2 cents I want to throw in on Mythic Plus is, as much as I like to see the change around, hey, we're considering moving up where the first affix kicks in and where the second one kicks in, I still want to see a squish, man. I want the numbers to go down. I want to see that the top end, how you get your portal, is running at 15. I want them to trim 5 levels out of this entire system and squish it. I really do.
I wouldn't mind that. I mean, I think another way to approach that would be just like, if I've completed a dungeon at a level, let me get a keystone for that dungeon that's 1 level lower or something, instead of potentially having a situation where, I went on vacation, or I've been too busy to do keys, and my key like deprecates lower, and then I don't know, I gotta like pump up the keys are very precious, I feel like, still, in a way that they don't really need to be. And maybe the benefit there is it encourages you to like use the dungeon finder and play with other people that maybe you wouldn't normally because they have a key that you want. But like, if you let people have more access to keys, then I think that also diminishes how many ranks exist, because it's like, well, you can just kind of pick within reason. You could pick a key that you want to do. That might cut down on the downside of like, well, there's 20 ranks that matter.
Well, here's the problem I have with it is the dauntingness of the system. The same thing with leveling. It's the exact same problem they have with, hey, we were up to level 120 on characters, right? And people are like, man, I have to start at 1 and work my way to 120, or if I buy this expansion, I get a boost and that gets me to 50 or 60 or whatever, and I get to 120. Like, that number factor is an issue with accessibility to the system. when people hear that people are running, 18s and 20s regularly, and they're going to start at 1 and it increases in difficulty and they struggle at 2s and 3s, they're never going to feel like they can ever accomplish getting up to that point. It's massively daunting in that sense. Whereas if you were people are running 15s or running 12s on a regular basis and you're starting at 1, it feels like, I can probably get to like 7s or, something like that. That doesn't seem too bad to do. But starting at a 1 and getting to a 14 or a 15 seems daunting enough, but trying to, get towards a 20 for a reward, it just seems like an overwhelming big system. So I think trimming a lot of the fat out of the levels of, how important is the difference between level 1 and level 4, right? As far as that keystone goes. Can we just drop all that down to 1 level? Is that really something we could look at doing, right? Like,
Yeah, and part of that is because, the overall reward structure for the mode, it's not like that was all mapped out before we started getting Keystone Dungeons, right? They've sort of tacked stuff on the reward structure over the years because they wanted to give players cool stuff to shoot for, or players were kind of vocal about like, hey, we want cool stuff for doing Mythic Plus, just like people get for raiding or doing PvP. And so stuff has been tacked on, and then, the system has sort of trended upwards in terms of where the relevance is and how many ranks are relevant. So yeah, I think Mythic Plus has been around a long time now. It's going to be 7 years old this year. And some of these things that have sort of been just baseline assumptions for what the mode is or how it works or how it's structured, I think they probably do need to change for the overall health of the mode. And yeah, I think, the sheer amount of ranks that are relevant, or how frustrating it could be to try to get a particular key or to like boost a key up. Like those are all things that I think could, potentially be on the table if they want to do a big rework here.
Yeah. Jumping ahead a little bit inside the notes. So if you're someone who like actually has class changes you want to look at actively, or set bonus changes you want to look at actively, feel free to check out the PTR notes. They are still so in flux that we're just not covering them very much on the show. Similarly with PvP tuning, there's still a lot of class changes happening with PvP tuning. But as far as professions go, we are seeing an option to swap the profession recipe window to a minimal view to allow other windows to open side by side. That's great. A lot of people were looking for that. I was suggesting why not just have like a scroller that like makes stuff bigger and smaller on your screen on the actual window, so you can like choose the size of things, because part of the issue with a lot of this is your resolution of your monitor and how much stuff can fit on your screen at the same time. And it'd be neat to have part of edit mode almost be like, I want to scale the size of this thing smaller, so it's only 10% of its size or 20% of its size versus it being 100% of its size. Individually, you can scale your UI. There's a general overall UI scaler slider that you can play with, but it'd be neat to have that something you can actually play with individually. For some of these panes and frames and panels and whatnot to have. I'd love to be able to have like my profession tab open, auction house open, mailbox open, and something else open at the same time. If you could actually manage to do that on a screen, it'd be kind of neat to see a layout like that. Now, obviously, you'd have to have an auction house mount and be sitting next to a mailbox to be able to do that. But, logically, I think it's possible to lay out a UI that lets you have multiple windows open like that and be able to manage between them. That would be nice if you could actually figure something like that out. Have your bags open, have the mailbox open, have the auction house open, have your profession tab open. Like that would be cool to be able to manage all that at the same time.
Maybe like snap stuff to different corners, or
right?
The profession overall has been really cool, but man, the UI windows are just so huge, man. They're unwieldy, and it's hard. Like sometimes you need to like look at a recipe. I'm trying to use the crafting orders, or I'm trying to fulfill a crafting order, and I need to open my bags, and I need to look at this other thing, and like it doesn't all fit on the screen. So I'm glad they're still tweaking it, because there's a lot of information that you need on the profession window as well, but it's gigantic, right, in the current live patch.
Yeah, and it's something to me of a lot of cases when I'm trying to do something, I end up closing and opening the same windows multiple times to rotate through things, as you said, to check my bags, to see what I have materials wise, to look inside the profession frame to see what I need to buy off the auction house, to then open the auction house and buy the thing I need, but then I forgot what was the other thing I needed, so I have to go back to the profession frame to look at it. Then you open the mailbox to get the stuff out of the mailbox, and you do the craft, but then you do the next piece, so you have to look. The opening and closing and opening and closing and opening and closing to me is something that has been around in World of Warcraft since the beginning, and if they're starting to get into edit mode and be able to actually change things like that, it'd be great to see some work done on UI to actually allow you to have more things open on your screen at the same time if you're in a crafting mode, right? Where you're like, hey, I'm just going to focus on crafting for the next little bit, as opposed to cycling through all of these panels all the time. I could just have them all open and actually manage it that way. Would be kind of a neat thing to be able to do. I'd even be fine if they wanted to make a table for that. Like you essentially go into an area and click on a table, and it's your professions table, and the professions table then opens up all these particular things in a previously determined by devs laid out screen, where you can essentially have an outbox, which is your mailbox, and you can have essentially like a working desk where you can actually work on things. Would be kind of a neat idea to do. But overall, a customizable thing for players would be nice to see. As far as user interface goes, though, we've seen other updates too. We saw an update to the look of the group loot for /loot frame. So if you notice that changed, it's there. There's also now a transmogrification option that replaces greed if the player has not collected the appearance yet. Transmog rolls take priority over greed rolls, just keeping that in mind. So if you're somebody who doesn't have a look yet, apparently they're valuing that over like off specs who want to roll greed for something. So if you're off spec, you might want to discuss stuff with your raid leader about whether or not you roll need for things, if that's the case that you're doing, so people aren't getting stuff just for look over top of something else that you have.
Yeah, but having like a dedicated
button to it,
dedicated to transmog roll, I think it could be really cool. So we'll see how it goes. It could be an issue with like roll for off spec or whatever. All this stuff could be fixed with letting guild groups have master loot, but I digress.
Yeah,
I mean, I'll take more options to group loot in lieu of that, so that's good. And I do think /loot needs a bit of a facelift. It does look pretty stale compared to the rest of the UI. So, good changes. I mean, it is going to be having the transmog option on rolls is good, but also creates, potential levels of friction. So it's just one more thing to kind of lay out there before, you kill a boss, I guess.
Yeah. It's there's still a lot happening on the PTR at the moment. There's, as I said, a lot of class tuning happening. They're still bringing stuff online. The sniff and seeking just came online, and they're still working on bringing it up to speed. They've done they've half implemented some profession stuff. Like you can now actually collect professions down inside the caverns of the new zone, but they still have some other stuff that they're working on turning on. There's just a lot of things that are still coming online. So I think in the next coming weeks, we'll see a lot of PTR changes every single week leading up to this actual launch. And if the PTR notes continue to be the size of the notes that we've experienced today, I think they're probably on a decent track, because they're still making lots of changes and there's still lots of work to do. So hopefully they make their way through that at a reasonable pace, because man, they definitely have a deadline set to them now.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing just like what we're seeing the most, I think, is just like the class changes and the class set changes and stuff getting redesigned and adjusted and tweaked and reworked, and UI support for changes, and the class stuff is just massive. I mean, we always say it, but it's like we've never seen this level of class changes this frequently, inside a live expansion, like ever. And we thought maybe that with the new talent trees and that whole rework, that it would be maybe a priority for them to keep that stuff fresh and to keep tweaking stuff and making changes. And I don't think we sort of had the perception of what it was actually going to be like in practice. I mean, there's so many changes, I feel like, to class and spec balance and design all the time. And also, like, we had set bonuses out the gate, man. We didn't have that back when we last had set bonuses, right? That first tier of like Legion, the Emerald Nightmare, like, you didn't have set bonuses there. So there's all kinds of balance and tuning around that every time out as well. So it's a lot. It seems like there's a lot of stuff in flux as we're a month out. Not that I'm concerned, because stuff is in flux with World of Warcraft all the time. It kind of has to be. Like, it's not like the patch is going to come out and nothing's going to change until the next patch. So, it just kind of is what it is. But it's weird how many plates I feel like are spinning right now, a month out from patch.
Yeah, it really does feel strange to be coming up this close on patch and still have so many changes taking place. But I do feel like this level of changes is what we need to see if we're going to get to that patch and have a good release. So, I mean, man, we were discussing, Jason and I were sort of going over our theory craft of release dates for patches this expansion, and seeing like, okay, if season 2 is kicking in here, then when's season 3 kicking in? And if that's kicking in then when is, right? And you're like, okay, so like BlizzCon this year, November, if that's when it's actually happening, probably season 3, right, kicking off, and then we're looking at season 4 halfway through next year, and then we have the expansion launch at the following BlizzCon / December. Like, kind of crazy to think about that's the release schedule that they're currently on, but the pacing's there. If they're doing this every 5 months, we get new stuff thing. So we'll have to.
Yeah, I mean that's the roadmap. We got that roadmap shortly after Dragonflight launched, and it was like, 10.1, 10.2 this year. So 10.1's got to come out before 10.2 does. So
yep.
I do think this season is a little on the too short side. Not egregiously though, not like Shadowlands season 3 was.
Yeah.
It's a little on the too short side, but that's probably okay if we're looking at a 6-month season for season 2 that rolls into, a November, December patch, and season 3 that takes us into like next spring, and then you have like the last kind of patch and season roll for Dragonflight. I mean, it seems like I'm pretty happy with a big patch and a season roll every 6 months. I feel like that's about right.
Yeah.
And this is about 5 months, which is not quite enough. But if we don't have any 4-month seasons and we don't have any 9-month seasons, then I can't really complain too much about the timing.
Agreed. And I'll certainly adapt and get used to a 5-month roll if that's what they end up being consistent with. But I'm with you that, if we don't have any 4-month seasons, we don't have any 9-month seasons, then I'm happy with a 5-month season. That's great. I'm still with you, though. I think every 6 months just feels right as far as what I'm used to, as far as my, playtime goes and sort of rhythm of World of Warcraft goes for me. All right, folks, if you've enjoyed listening to this episode, consider heading on over to our iTunes or Apple Podcast. Leave us a 5-star review. They really help out our show, and we love reading reviews from our listeners. We also want to give a big shout out and thanks to all of our patrons. Thank you so much, patrons, for supporting our show. It means so much to us. They contribute a ton to our show, and they help to improve on the content we create. I'm going to give a shout out here to Arajian, Celian, Kapawi, Max, Milble the Mighty, Nick, Shorel, Viper14, and Zalius. Thank you so much for hopping in and supporting the show on our Patreon. We really appreciate it. Our newest patron this week is Chandler K. Thank you for hopping in, and I love that we know a Chandler because I didn't know any, and I love the name. It's a great name, so good for you jumping in, supporting the show. Appreciate that. Patreon's over at patreon.com/thestartingzone. And looking forward to hearing from our patrons as they give us little write-ins and we get to chat with them, and heading on over to our Discord to do that.
Absolutely. Thank you for the support, patrons. It means a lot, and welcome aboard, Chandler. Glad to have you. And patrons make it possible for us to keep the show on track, get you a weekly episode, give or take. And, give you there's an episode every week. It may not be the same day of the week, but
it is.
Yeah, right. It's there.
Yep.
Just to have it at the level that you expect and deserve, and patrons are a big part of that. So thank you for supporting the show. It means a lot.
Yeah, I can't do anything with the thunder and the rain today, but I'm sure it's not too noisy and whatnot happening coming through for people. And hey, maybe it's a fun little thing. You get to, here's some thunder that's all dramatic happening during the show. Who knows? Anyways, that's going to wrap up episode 572 of The Starting Zone. If you want to check out show notes for this episode, leave us a comment on the show. You can head on over to thestartingzone.com, the official website for the Starting Zone podcast. If you want to contact the show and leave us your feedback or ask a question, you can email us at thestartingzone@gmail.com, or reach out to us on Twitter. Or as I mentioned earlier, you can join our Discord over at startingzone.com/Discord. All of our patrons are hanging out there, as well as a lot of other listeners and asking us questions and chatting with folks, and always appreciate the contributions you all make. If you want to get your hands on some TSE gear, you can find that over at tpublic.com/stores/thestartingzone. We got shirts and mugs and stickers and all that sort of fun stuff. And Jason, where can folks find you on the interwebs?
The best place to find me, as always, over on Twitter. You can find me over there at Shieldwald. And you can also find me streaming WoW over on twitch.tv/Shieldwald and youtube.com/Shieldwald. Drops are over for this round, so going back out to YouTube as well. So come check out those channels if you'd like. Streams are typically Tuesday, Wednesday, Sunday nights, 7:30 Eastern for raids and keystones and whatever other patch stuff we're doing. Although the schedule might be a little light this week because of the aforementioned attendance and holiday stuff.
And if you're trying to find me, you can find me over at over at Spencer_Downey on Twitter or on Twitch at twitch.tv/SpencerHD or over on YouTube at SpencerHD. And with that, for Jason and myself, we want to say thanks for listening and jobs done.